Shaykh Ahmed Saad Al-Azhari, welcome back to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you.
So Al-Azhar is widely known around the world as being a leading authority in Islam. And you go by the name Al-Azhari because you studied there and you're obviously proud of that. So tell us about what makes Al-Azhar University so prominent. How did it rise, first of all, to its prominence?
Let me start with a statement that was said by one of the leading figures of Al-Azhar, who actually was the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. His name is Shaykh Abdul Halim Mahmoud. He said if people's Hajj is not acceptable unless they go to the Kaaba, people's knowledge is not acceptable unless they come to Al-Azhar. So which is quite a big statement, but it has its background. In the beginning of the 4th century after the Hijrah, which is the migration of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, which happened around 620 CE. At the beginning of that century, the Abbasid Khilafah, or the Abbasid Caliphate, started to dwindle and go through weakness. Actually, it even started a little bit earlier than that. And with the coming of the Mughals and the Tatars, who destroyed the Islamic Caliphate in the Abbasid Caliphate in what we know nowadays as Iraq, there was much need for a center of learning that can protect the Islamic knowledge and can accommodate students of knowledge and accommodate scholars as well. Due to the political scene in the Middle East at that time, the Fatimids, who were ruling in what we know nowadays as Morocco, and they were Shia by their school of thought. They were Shia, Ismaili Shia, or what we know as the Seveners. They came to Egypt to expand their state. So they occupied Egypt, invaded Egypt, took it over. Actually, they took over what we know nowadays as Mecca and Al-Madinah, that side of Saudi Arabia, of the Arabian Peninsula. And Jawhar the Sicilian, the army leader of the first leader or ruler of the Fatimid state, established the city of Cairo. That's why up to this date it's known as Qahiratul Mu'izz, the Cairo of Al-Mu'izz. Al-Mu'izz is the name of the first ruler who kind of expanded the Fatimid state. They, as it was the tradition in those days, they established a center for learning in the city, a big mosque, and they named it Al-Azhar, either because the area around it was full of zuhur, flowers, or because they claimed that they come from the lineage of Fatima Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So they established that mosque, which is much smaller than the current mosque actually, because it has been expanded through generations. And they started a lot of circles for teaching Islamic jurisprudence according to their school of thought, and other circles of learning in the mosque. When the Fatimid state dwindled, terminated at the hands of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, Saladin, the mosque, which has been seen by Salah ad-Din, and Salah ad-Din himself was a Sunni, which has been seen as a center for Shi'ism and Shia teaching, was closed for 100 years. And Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi banned any Friday prayers there, any regular prayers, any activities in the mosque. But then after 100 years of establishing his dynasty and bringing the country back to Sunnism, because the country was not affected a lot by the Shia school of thought, which was brought by the Fatimids, and this is one of the areas where they failed actually to change the mentality of the people. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi closed the mosque. 100 years later, the mosque was reopened. And this coincided with the fact that there were crusaders. The Muslim world was hit hard by a scourge of war, by many enemies, the Mughals and the Tatars who came from one side, from the east, the crusaders who occupied pockets of the Muslim world, Palestine, and they were still having a presence in what we know nowadays as Syria, some even parts of Egypt. So this has led Muslims even in Spain were kicked out and they ended up in Morocco. Muslims from different parts of the world found a safe haven in Egypt because it's far from these places. It was seen as one of the good and big civilizations, like one of the prominent cosmopolitan cities. Cairo was seen as a cosmopolitan city at that time. So they came all over from all over the Muslim world. They settled in Cairo. People came from Iraq, people came from the Arabian Peninsula, people came from Syria, people came from North Africa. They settled in Cairo and they started teaching in Al-Azhar Mosque. At that time, it is as if Allah has predestined for Al-Azhar to play a prominent role. So He brought all scholars from different parts, along with students who also came to learn and seek knowledge in Al-Azhar, and the country has accommodated them and welcomed them. And they, after a period of time, they became themselves almost indigenous Egyptians. Mm-hmm. So that's the point that has actually shifted the whole flow of Al-Azhar, the whole history of Al-Azhar, from just being an ordinary mosque where people just pray 5 times a day and there is a Friday prayer, to becoming one of the most important, if not at that point, the most important center of learning in the Muslim world.
And that was approximately about 700 years ago?
Yes, around that.
Okay, and so what happened at that point? Who were some of the main figures and who took Al-Azhar to the next level, can we say?
If we scan some of the names of the scholars at that time, we realize that many of them were actually not from Egypt. Their grandparents and their parents came from somewhere else. For instance, one of the leading scholars of hadith is a man called Al-Hafiz Abdul Rahim Al-Iraqi. And Al-Iraqi is originally from Iraq. His great-grandfather came from Iraq and settled in Egypt. He was born in Egypt, and because he grew up in Egypt, started learning in Azhar, teaching in Azhar, and he became one of the leading figures of hadith. His student Al-Hafiz ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani, who died around 852 after Hijrah, after Prophet's immigration, was by far the most notable hadith figure in the past 900 years. Other scholars who traveled from different parts of the Muslim world, like Ibn al-Jazari, who was born in 751 and died 833 Hijri. He traveled from Syria or Damascus, the city of Damascus, to Al-Azhar to study with the scholars of Al-Azhar. So the student of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the great hadith scholar, Al-Hafiz al-Sakhawi, who died around 903, is another great figure. Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, who was another great scholar of hadith, tafsir, Quran commentary, and language, and a great jurist as well in the Shafi'i madhab, Shafi'i school of thought. He died around 911. He was in that living in Egypt. So you can say that the 8th, 9th, and 11th century were, for at least 400 years, Al-Azhar was leading and taking the lead of Islamic learning because of these great figures. That one of our teachers mentions that one of his teachers saw in his dream there were some works, some construction works in the mosque itself, and because of that they were digging the floor. There was a lot of dust all over the place. So that teacher got annoyed by the fact that this dust comes on his clothes and makes them dirty. So he saw in his dream the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, saying to him, don't be angry, for you don't know how many scholars and righteous people have actually walked on this dust. So this dust is actually mixed with the feet of people of learning. And as you know, that learning and teaching, circles of learning and teaching, especially sacred knowledge in Islam, are points where angels descend upon the people who attend there, and mercy of Allah covers and encapsulates them. So it's places where God's blessings are normally showered upon the people who are participating. So all of this, bearing all of this in mind, it was as if Allah has placed Al-Azhar in those years to protect Islam and to look after it. And that's why they say, had it not been for Al-Azhar at that time, the religion of Islam would have been lost.
I want to get a sense of the culture of learning at Al-Azhar prior to the modern period and the changes that happened then. What was it like to be a student or a scholar at Al-Azhar?
Imam al-Shafi'i, who died in 204 and was born 150 Hijri, says that a student of knowledge won't be able to achieve knowledge unless he has dedication. We mean by dedication being a full-time student of knowledge. And this was at the back of the minds of the Muslim scholars and people who looked after Islamic scholarship from the very beginning. So when they established the schools of learning, the centers of learning, the mosques and other things, they would, which catered for the educational needs and learning needs of the students, they made sure that these students don't need anything outside the school of learning. So when the student comes, his food is catered for, a place for his accommodation, and he has nothing to do from early morning, from dawn time, all the way to Isha or evening prayer, except learning. This tradition was also in Al-Azhar. So Al-Azhar was not only a place for people to come and study and go home, because going home afterwards, nowadays, going home, there are so many attractions and distractions at home that will make the student not fully focused on his studies. So in those days, there was this concept of mujawara. Mujawara literally means to be the neighbor of something. But it was used later on to mean a student who becomes a full-time student by moving from home to become the neighbor of the mosque, meaning he lives in the mosque. So in Al-Azhar, even till today, although they are not used anymore, if you go upstairs, there is 120 rooms. Each room can easily accommodate 10 people at least. So 10 people by 120, that we are talking about a huge amount of people. We are talking about more than 1,000 individuals living and sleeping and eating and learning in the mosque. And in each group, between each group of these rooms, there is a hall where the students would convene to study and to revise their classes and also to read with their teacher. And it was the system, this actually has developed a very interesting administrative system in the mosque itself. So for instance, people who came from a specific area, they were placed and they were put in rooms that are next to each other, so that they understand the culture of each other. They possibly, when they travel back to their homes, if some of them are not traveling, not returning for this year, because understanding that means the transportation in those days were quite difficult, so students would not be frequently going home. And when we say frequently going home, it means once a year, because the system of studying was starting from the middle of the month of Shawwal, which is the 10th month in the Hijri calendar, right after Ramadan. So from the 15th of Shawwal, they will continue studying till the 15th of Sha'ban. So from month 10 to the month 8. So for 10 complete months, the students are there. Every morning from before dawn time, they will start by doing some night prayers, and then praying their early morning prayer, then doing some awrad or some remembrance of God early in the day, and then doing their classes up till noon time, and then having a siesta, and then starting again till close to Maghrib or sunset, and then praying, and then going back to class, doing some revision, and then right after evening prayer, everyone is in bed to be able to wake up so early in the morning. That was the system for 10 months. In the middle of the month of Sha'ban, right before Ramadan, 15 days before Ramadan, everyone goes to his city or to his town or to his village or travels back home. What do they do in these 15 days? They prepare people in their own localities to celebrate the month of Ramadan. People were almost celebrating this newcomer, this returning student, because they placed a lot of respect for these students who are learning in the prestigious Al-Azhar. So these students would be in their local mosques or in their local in their localities or in their local communities, teach them, lead them in Taraweeh, in the evening prayers of the month of Ramadan, guide them, teach them, spread this culture of learning, and then celebrate Eid with their families. 15 days after Eid, they will make their way back to Al-Azhar to continue 10 months.
In modern times, obviously Al-Azhar must have faced many challenges as the entire Muslim world has faced. So can you tell us a little bit about what are some of those challenges and what role does Al-Azhar have to play today?
Well, I believe that every organization or institution or even community or even civilization that has been persistent for so long goes through times of decline and times of, you can, as they say, you know, like the tide of and the flow of the days. So there is many challenges that are facing Al-Azhar in the modern times, as much as many other organizations go through the same challenges. One of these challenges is, in my opinion, is the fact that with the media and with the uprise of many extremist groups who interpret Islam in a different way and have this rigid understanding of Islam, they are challenging the authority of Al-Azhar as much as they are challenging the authority of other centers of learning. Nowadays we have a problem of authority. Whom do you listen to? Whom do you follow? Whom do you take your opinion from? Who is a scholar? Even the concept of scholarship has been liquidated, so that a regular person in the street, if you ask him who is a scholar, he wouldn't be able to tell who is a scholar. At those days, there was kind of a very strict, you can say, perspective of a religious scholar, that he has to be a graduate of a specific school of learning. Traditionally, we had these schools of learning, whether it's Al-Azhar, whether it's the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, whether it's some centers of learning in the Indian subcontinent and in Mecca and Medina. But nowadays, there is so much knowledge or no knowledge all over the place. So what has happened, the biggest challenge Al-Azhar faces nowadays is people not listening to them. You know, like a father in the family. If the father is respected and there is an atmosphere of respect, everyone knows, even if the father doesn't speak, the children will have this respect for him and they will be valuing his opinion. But once you liquidate the status of the father in the family, then there is no authority. And nowadays we face this problem at different levels: political level, economic level, even at a family level, and also in religious learning. So with satellite channels and many people who are calling themselves the new televangelists, these people of da'wah, we don't know who is a scholar and who is not. We don't know who is a speaker and who is a scholar. So what happens for a regular person who is watching the media, he is unable to differentiate between both. He might be challenging an Azhari scholar, saying, you know what, why are you saying this? I have heard something else. So that's one of the biggest challenges that face Al-Azhar at the moment. Another challenge that is facing Al-Azhar at the moment is people thinking or mixing the nature of Al-Azhar as an educational institute with the political situation that is running in the country, or actually in the Middle East. So they want Al-Azhar to have a political opinion in every area, not realizing that Al-Azhar is an educational institute that advises, that should be neutral, that should guide people rather than taking sides with any of the groups.
There's so much more that we could say and look into the fascinating history and legacy of Al-Azhar. Thank you very much, Shaykh Ahmed, Saad, for joining us.
Thank you very much for hosting me.